refugees. Monday was World Refugee Day. So we're going to take a moment. I want to ask you a question. How many of you, if I were to ask you today, what would be the 3 most dangerous cities to live in the world? What would you say? No, but don't get your phones out. Just go ahead and say them out. What do you think it is? Somebody said Syria. Anybody else? No guesses? The top 3 most dangerous cities. I'll tell you. As of this morning, the number 1 most dangerous city in the world is Caracas, Venezuela. The second most dangerous city in the world is San Pablo Sula in Honduras. And the third most dangerous city is San Salvador in El Salvador. I want to tell you about a little girl that I had the privilege of working with at my organization. She was 9, but she was a very short 9 with long dark hair. And she was in our program from Honduras. She had a sibling, a little tiny sister that was 5. And part of her assessment, part of my job was to do the clinical assessment, the therapeutic assessment, and with the children in order to keep them safe. One of the conversations that we have to have is about their safety and their if there's any self-harmful behaviors, obviously if there is any type of suicidal ideation. And so as much as that's hard to ask little children, we still need to do that. So, I got down and we were talking and I said, have you ever thought about hurting yourself or ending your life? And she looked at me. I said, tell me about that. And she said, well, right before I got to this country, she said the cartels, the gangs, had threatened my family. They had put a piece of paper under our door and said unless we gave them $50,000 American dollars, they were going to kidnap my sister and I. And she said, and I knew that was real because I knew it had happened to kids at my school. And I knew what happened when they did that. When they kidnap them, they don't just kill them, they torture them slowly. They cut their toes off. Then they cut their fingers off. Then they do other terrible things. She said, and I wanted to be prepared so that I could protect myself and my sister. And if the gangs got us, I had a plan. I had a plan how I was going to make sure we die before anybody tortured us. Now join me for a few minutes while we go to a different side of the world. These stories are so touching. We've been going through Psalms this summer and talking about the heart of what it means to be a Christian and how do we do that. And right here, right now, the Psalms are speaking to us, and that's a little bit of what we'd like to do with you for a few minutes. We like to think about the fact that Jesus was a refugee. He had to flee to Egypt because someone was trying to kill him. And so keep that in mind as we do a little bit of talking right now. We like to say from the shores of Syria to the shores of Lake Michigan. We've got refugees right in our communities. We had the privilege of resettling 2 Syrian families just within the last 3 weeks. It's been a blessing and an honor to work with these families. We also talked about in first service that we were able to resettle a refugee family in early May from the Congo, and come to find out they were Adventist. They had heard about the Seventh-day Adventist message at a refugee camp. It was a beautiful experience. Valerie is going to share with us some concrete things we can do.
Yes. If we could just, awesome. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was just giving of yourself. We do have opportunities for you to be able to open up your home and be able to have these refugee children come here. And the one thing that I like to say is that these kids, as you see these moving stories, these kids, a lot of them do have a religion and they do pray. And guess who they pray to? God. And they say, God, I want to get out of this refugee camp. Like, I want to leave. Or, God, can you give me a family? Or, God, can you help me out here? And when the prayers go to God, I ask myself, they're going to God, and then after that, what happens? God calls us, the church, to move and to say, you know what? Somebody spoke to me about opening up my home today and saying, I want to accept a refugee in my home because I know that if I do not open up my home, that refugee child will have an unanswered prayer, and I do not want to give them the idea that we, as the United States of America, or as a comfortable Christian, do not want to take that risk. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about that, opening up your home and heart, of giving that refugee a second chance to finally get out of the refugee camp or the detention center or whatever situation that they might be in order to have access to education, in order to have the ability to thrive in their lives again. And this is a really important task, and I know it's a hard one, and it's a risk that you have to take, but I feel like that's what God is calling us as a church to do, to move, to answer the prayers of others, and to show people what God is really like and that He is listening to their prayers. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was give of your time. That's kind of where I step in. I work a lot with volunteers, and the one thing that you can do is either be a mentor and join our mentoring program, in which you may not be able to open up your home for various reasons, but you can be a mentor for a child, whether you're a doctor or whether you're a physician or a teacher or your student. You have life experiences that you can share with them. And also, you can just give them your time and your love because they need people to help them go through their situations. And you can do that by signing up to become a mentor and emailing me, visagamini@bethany.org. And also, another thing that you can do is help us create events for the mentors, because it's actually something that we want to do for the kids. We want to give them opportunities to go and visit a college or to be able to have a career exploration activity, so that they can look forward and look at the ways that they can thrive and the ways that they can grow up and become good citizens of the U.S. And this can all happen by you guys just opening up the possibilities for us to do that. We need partnerships like that, especially since here we have an Andrews University. It'd be awesome to have them come and tour the university, so that they can have an option to say, hey, like I went to Andrews and I loved the tour and I want to go to school there. And you never know what God can do there. And another thing is bring awareness to the issue. As a Salvadorian by birth, I have two parents that are Salvadorian. My mom was actually born in the U.S. My dad was an immigrant. He actually came here through a foot guide that was paid in order for him to escape the civil war that was happening in El Salvador at the time. So I know that there can be a lot of negative, media and press that is out in the world today, but what we need is positivity. We need people to bring awareness to the issue by having events or speaking about it with your neighbor, whoever it is that you have close to you, and showing them the positive aspects of immigration and having refugees here in the U.S. and the diversity that it brings to even our congregations. Another thing is to give of your resources, but I wanted to speak one more thing about Welcome Michigan. Welcome Michigan is an organization that I would love for you guys to get involved in. They are promoting and they're advocating for immigrants and the foreigners and refugees that are coming to the U.S. and just looking at ways in which these people that are foreign, and you might be a foreigner yourself, how they can thrive in the communities that we have. And I wonder, is Berrien Springs a place where an immigrant or a foreigner or a refugee can thrive? Are there resources that we can provide to them? And Welcome Michigan helps you with that. Okay, so then the next thing is give of your resources. So we have a newsletter of needs that we just began to do because we have a lot of things that are coming up that we need help in. We don't have access to everything that we would like to, and that's where we need people to step in. Whether it be standing fans, we just opened up a boys' home, and then the boys are hot, and there's no AC, so they want standing fans because it's hot in there. And we have a kid from Afghanistan, and we have a kid from Honduras. We have kids from all over the world, and they're just there, and they need basic things like this. Another thing is Spanish children's books or even English children's books, because we have kids all the time that are coming, and we want to give them something like a children's book or help them to be able to learn the English language since we know that they're going to be here in the U.S. now. And another thing is give of property. We do want to keep on opening up homes for kids. We know that a lot of times foster families don't always come, and we want to be able to provide a place for them. So whether that be a property that you may have laying around that you haven't used lately, in which the kids can, we can have a home there in which the kids can go there and they can have staff. And so that's another thing that you can do also. And then lastly, I want to talk about the Refugee Fund. The Refugee Fund is something that we really need help in because there's always things that come up that the kids need, and it's always emergencies. Last minute kind of things of, oh, this child is no longer able to stay at this foster home because of financial issues in the home, or whatever it may be. Ingrid was telling me that one of the things that is going on right now is that we have a large sibling group that came from the Republic of Congo, and not the Republic of Congo, from Kenya, and they were in a refugee camp there, originally from Sudan, and they want to stay together. The oldest brother promised that they would all stay together as a sibling group and that he would take care of them right before their parents died. So they want to keep this promise, but at the moment they can't all live together because the home is not big enough. And we're trying to make it possible for them to be able to just even build a new room so that they can all be together, because we need space for them, and we need them to be there together as a sibling group, because I can imagine what it's like to come to the U.S. and to be with your siblings, your family. This is your crew. Like, you do not want to let go of these people. These people have gone through a lot with you. And now they're here in the U.S., and the last thing that you want to do is to be separated from the last family that you have. You know nobody in the U.S. You want to be with your family. And we want to provide that opportunity, and that could be through donating to the Refugee Fund, whether to be to us or even to ADRA. We encourage you to do that because these refugees really do need help. And those prayers that are going up to heaven, we want them to be answered. God is doing a mighty thing with the migration that's happening all around the world. He is bringing people to him. In these times, they're the most volatile, they're most vulnerable, and they seek out God. And I remember watching this video of refugees all in a boat, in an inflatable boat. And as soon as the engine, this was one with an engine, the engine turned off, and then all of a sudden they all stopped and they said, Allah. And I was like, oh Lord, they're calling out to you. And I just felt it at that moment, and I said, God, they're calling out to you. They all just said it, and they said their prayers, and they were like, God, help us, save us. And that's where I want us to step in and be like, we heard the prayers. God heard the prayers, and we're ready to respond. So please respond with us.
Hey, it's a beautiful day, particularly in here. Man, I love the video, and I was so moving to think about what we could do right here, and the music. Thank you all so much. Very nice. And welcome to the Sabbath teaching for this morning. Since I was last here, I have spent an entire month on a Bible Lands study tour, teaching through much of the land of Turkey and places in Europe. There were two sites in particular that I had never visited before, and I found them both so profoundly moving for me that I want to tell you just a little bit about them. The first one, and I wish that every single one of you could visit this place, and maybe some of you have, but it was a very remote, old Waldensian community in the mountains of northern Italy. And of course, the scenery was breathtaking. The ride there was incredible. But even more so was the history of the spiritual depth and courage of these people. If you are unfamiliar with the Waldensian people, you should look it up and you should read about them. There's a really good place you can find out some stuff in the first chapters of Great Controversy. But they have amazing people who stood up for their love of God. We worshipped in one of their old temples, as they call it. The acoustics were fantastic. We sang, and it was prayed. It was wonderful there. My husband was along. We had a little mini choir, and it was really wonderful. We also visited some ancient homes, and we climbed even further up. It nearly killed me, really, to a school that was way up and hidden in the mountains where they taught spiritual things and had a school up there. And then we even climbed to another place and went down into a dark, deep cave where all 35 of us managed to fit inside, and we sang songs together in that dark cave and prayed and imagined the experiences of the Waldensians who had hidden in similar caves. Maybe that cave, nobody tried to say that, but similar caves and like that, and in hiding because they were constantly suffering under relentless persecution for their Christian beliefs and their devotion. And honestly, it was unlike anything I had ever really experienced before. I found it very precious, of course, but if I were honest, I found it also somewhat challenging to my own sense of spiritual strength and fortitude, and whether I could ever have survived or been that kind of a person at that time. The other favorite place that we went to was Rome, and I'd also never been to Rome. And I had the great privilege of preaching one Sabbath in Rome. First of all, the church that we visited was almost entirely conducted by women. And evidently this is quite common in many parts of Europe, where the women bear the burden and most of the work of the church. And that was also so inspiring on a number of levels. Frankly, particularly because in light of what we sort of voted regarding women last summer, and these women are undaunted and just joyful and embracing and devoted, and it was very wonderful to be there. Of course, the men and the other families and everyone was really nice to us, made us feel very much at home. But for me, in particular, the chance to preach the gospel in that ancient city where thousands of years before, the apostles Peter and Paul, people who knew or had met Jesus personally, had also preached, was humbling and thrilling and once again kind of sobering. And I guess I wondered how much longer we'd preach in that city. The story of Jesus and him still not returning. And whether we had the same level of tangible conviction and commitment as those guys. And I wondered, too, how that conviction and that commitment should look in the 21st century. Maybe we got some good ideas today about how it should look. But anyway, the visit was a real spiritual process for me, and I'm very grateful for it. We also visited the 7 churches in Revelation in parts of Turkey, very reminiscent of our last semester's study, along with obviously studying the Reformation. And so we went through a little Italy, a little bit of France, a little bit of Switzerland, ended up in Germany and spent some time there. It was a great trip, 4 weeks long. And as always is the case, I'm really, really glad to be home and very happy to be with you here today. As you all know, or if you don't, I'll tell you, we're in the midst of studying in the book of Psalms. We're in books 2 and book 3. And so let's pray and get started here this morning. Pray with me. Gracious God and Father, you know our best intentions and deepest desires. Moreover, you know what so easily distracts us and sends us down some less than helpful diversion of thought and preoccupation. So I ask this morning for spiritual focus. Make something clear, encouraging, directive, and helpful to us today, and give us a vision for how we can use it for the benefit of someone else. Just because we showed up this morning, and you love us that much. I pray this in the precious and wonderful name of Jesus. We love you. Amen. Our selected study for today is Psalms chapters 87 and 88. And as we begin here, I'm just wondering if anyone has read those chapters in anticipation for the study today. Anybody? Oh, we got a few people. The vast majority of you are not in trouble. You're not in trouble. But did you read them one after the other at the same time? Okay, because I found that a very interesting thing. The first time I did and I read them, I thought, wow, okay. I think it would be good for us to just straight out read them as we start. So you can find Psalms 87, and then we'll read 88 as well. I'm going to read it out loud from the NIV, and we'll put it up on the board as well for those who just like to look out and listen. Let's do this now. Chapter 87 first, Psalms 87. It says that this is of the sons of Korah. We've talked a little bit about Korah here, the sons of Korah. I know Pastor Kenley addressed that quite heavily one time. So this is one of their songs. It does say that it is a psalm or a song. So here we go. He has set his foundation on the holy mountain. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. Glorious things are said of you, O city of God. I will record Rahab and Babylon among those who acknowledge me. Philistia too, and Tyre, along with Cush. And will say, this one was born in Zion. Indeed, of Zion it will be said, this one and that one were born in her. And the Most High himself will establish her. The Lord will write in the register of the peoples. This is the equivalent to the county clerk's office. He will write in the register of the people, this one was born in Zion. As they make music, they will sing, all my fountains are in you. It's a nice song, really nice song. And at its core, I do believe that this song is fundamentally about belonging, yes? At least for the folks mentioned in the lyrics. God says clearly, you were born in Zion, my holy city. Indeed, of Zion it will be said, this one and that one were born in her. It's even written in the registry. Zion is your birthplace, your home. You belong to me. And they sing back to him, yes, yes, we know where we're from. All our fountains are in you. Nice song, nice song. Now, many scholars believe that this psalm is speaking of the Christian church, where through Jesus Christ, everyone from all nations comes together under God, and it certainly makes sense and is applicable, I believe. But regardless of the exact intent or meaning, it is safe to presume that this song is about humans as children of God, born of and belonging to him. And as the song says, they are born in Zion. Okay, well, let's read the next one, see what we got. Chapter 88, also from the sons of Korah. It says it's a song, it's a psalm, so we've got that paradigm. O Lord, the God who saves me, day and night I cry out before you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of trouble, and my life draws near the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I'm like a man without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, who you remember no more, who are cut off from your care. But you have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavy upon me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have taken me from my closest friends, and you've made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. I call to you, O Lord, every day. I spread out my hands to you. Do you show your wonders to the dead? Do those who are dead rise up and praise you? Is your love declared in the grave, your faithfulness in destruction? Are your wonders known in the place of darkness, or your righteous deeds in the land of the oblivion? I cry to you, O Lord, for help. In the morning, my prayers come before you. Why, O Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth, I have been afflicted and close to death. I have suffered your terrors, and I am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surround me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You have taken my companions and loved ones from me, and darkness is my closest friend. Wow. Both songs from the same author, both from the collection of the sons of Korah. And my first response after reading them together was, these guys are unstable. They're in some kind of psychological throw of a hard swing from one extreme to the other. First, they speak of God's holy city, Zion, of which presumably they think they might belong, of which they sing and worship and praise and celebration because they were born there, born in Zion as children of God and part of his chosen family. And now, in the very next chapter, they're in the grave, all but dead, and abandoned by God and family, fatally stricken with grief under the wrath and terrors of God. Either these sons of Korah are schizophrenic, or there is something we may not quite understand about the book of Psalms. I think we should go with the second option. I know that we are well into the study of the Psalms this summer, and I am arriving late on the scene. But when I read through my assigned chapters, I felt the need to revisit the meaning and purpose of these songs in Scripture holistically, and to kind of restudy just a bit the nature and type of writing found here, particularly given the strident contrast of the two chapters for today. It's not my intention to try and explore all the various forms and styles of writing found in the book. I'm not nearly qualified to do that. But there are some very basic concepts that you should keep in mind when reading through the book of Psalms. And I want to mention a couple of them today. First of all, as you know, these are literally songs. In most cases, they were written with music, and they even had instrumentation for accompaniment. And the fact that we now almost only and exclusively read them rather than sing them does create a few issues for us. About half the songs were written by David, and these generally are reflections of his life and his experiences. But there are a lot of general songs too, such as the ones we read today, that we have very little by way of context to know why or where they were written. But what we do know is this: these songs are fundamentally relational in nature. That is, they're about people experiencing real life, and they are about God. And further, they were written for the explicit use in sacred worship. Both of these. We've talked about what constitutes worship here before at one place. And one of the definitions that I find very helpful for me is that at its core, worship is human beings seeking to make connection with God. So, the first important consideration to remember is that psalms are worship songs that seek to, obviously in various ways, they seek to make connection between us and God. Secondly, and here I will try to explain a little bit some of the problems that come with reading things that were really meant to be sung. If we talked in the same way we sang or used poetry, well, then there'd be no need for songs and poetry, yes? In other words, songs and poetry are unique. They fill a human need and are intentionally different from our normal speech. This is critical to apply when reading and understanding much of the book of Psalms. In songs, for instance, we often repeat words over and over again, and generally no one feels uncomfortable. But if we did the same thing without the melody, people would begin to question our sanity. He loves me. Oh, how he loves me. 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 I didn't get tired of singing it, though. Not at all. The truth is that melodic lines and chords and rhythms and dynamics and drums coming in and drums staying out, it all makes repetition not only acceptable, but effective, even powerful in communicating feelings and sentiments. Music and literary applications allow for a lot of something else too. They embrace the idea of overemphasis, intensity, and magnification. So in music and in poetry, we often find exaggerated descriptions of life, where people are brighter than stars and sweeter than honey and have faces that can launch 1,000 ships. Really? I don't think there's any face that can launch a ship. But we get it because we know that feeling. We've seen that face, or we hope to. In poetry and songs, excesses are intentionally used in an attempt to express the emotion and feeling that lie beneath and beyond what mere prose and regular speech can convey. And sometimes nothing else will do. This is the book of Psalms at its best. And our two chapters for today are both great examples. So let's review them for just a minute. In chapter 87, that really nice one, the point of the song was belonging and identifying specific people that were born in the city of God, Zion. Rahab, one of the first people mentioned, perhaps the first, for instance. Was Rahab born in Zion? No. She was a Canaanite prostitute, likely born and raised in Jericho, where the Hebrew spies found her. But she belongs to God. And eventually she finds her way into the literal bloodline of the incarnate God, Jesus Christ. And at that point, that is the point. In the heart of God, she comes from Zion. And the psalmist knows this, so he takes literary license and he claims her birth in Zion. It isn't physically true, but it is absolutely and honestly true when it comes to matters of the heart. How about the Philistines, or what most of us know as the people of the land of the Philistines? They're mentioned here too. But they weren't born in Zion, not at all. I think they come from Crete or something. And the Bible tells us in other places outside of this psalm that the Philistines were actually uncircumcised and most definitely not part of the chosen people of the Old Testament. Further, biblical history also shows us that the Philistines were often the greatest threat to Israel and generally her arch enemy. But they belong to the human race. And clearly it is God's hope and desire that they would come to know him and recognize him as their father. The sons of Korah here are taking literary license to express a hope, a longing, a feeling, a desire, an eternal commitment and dream of God that speaks to the Philistines' original design. This one was born in Zion, the psalmist says. Music expresses the heart and the psyche of the soul. Well, how about chapter 88 then? Because that was pretty nice. What's going on here? Is the author really repulsive to his friends? That's one of the saddest lines in the whole place for me. Or is that just the way he feels right now? And if that's the case, is it still valid Can we legitimately sing about how we feel, especially if it's negative and we're in worship? Have you ever been certain that you were hideous or looked stupid in the eyes of somebody, only to find out later it actually wasn't true? It happens. But it's how you felt at the time. You felt alone, unworthy, or foolish, or ugly. It was your frame of mind. It was how you felt at the moment. And it didn't matter whether it was actually true or not. And that's part of being terribly human. Or how about the author's claim that he's lying in the pit, in the grave? That's probably not true either. Generally, people that are alive don't do that. We don't lie in graves. But maybe he's physically sick, or more likely, he's just depressed. And that's legitimate too. That's a real feeling, and he's described it very well. That's how he feels. He feels like he's already dead. And the heavy waves of God wash over him because. It's hard to be a believer and admit that you struggle with depression. But God knows. And now you know that you can talk about it in front of him. He's heard it all before. And it didn't stop him from loving and saving the likes of David or the sons of Korah or a million other people too. So then, is it really God's wrath and terrors that are burdening down this songwriter? Or is he frustrated that he has served God his whole life from his youth? So says verse 15. And still, it can be so miserable and so difficult at times. These are raw emotions and genuine human feelings here, whether they are appropriated accurately or not. And they are spoken to God in an act of profound, honest connection. And it is recorded here in Psalms for a reason. Wisdom scholars have generally identified 7 different categories or types of psalms in Scripture. And it would be very helpful to keep that in mind as you read through the book. There are songs of lament, and chapter 88 is a perfect case in point. These are songs of sorrow, discouragement, distress, anger, fear, etc. And as it turns out, the book of Psalms has more songs of lament than any other kind. Psalms isn't a book of pretense. It is conspicuously human, with plenty of regret, sadness, suffering, and angst. And all of it gets spilled out before the throne of God as part of worship. Worshiping a God who accepts us for who we are and takes us from where we are and moves with us along the way. And that is worthy of our deepest gratitude. There are also songs of thanksgiving, songs of praise, of course. There are a few about salvation, particularly as it relates to the Hebrews. And there are some psalms about celebration and affirmation, and there's some that are called wisdom psalms, and they're written kind of like a proverb with some advice on how to live wisely. And the last category is identified as psalms of trust. So, one of the many things that the book of Psalms does so well, and the very point that I wish to make with you today is, Psalms, perhaps above all else, gives a safe voice to human emotions. Our anger, our fear, our worry, our joy, our bravery, and our worst insecurities. They are all up for discussion in the book of Psalms. Our confirmation of love and devotion too. The presence of God in our life and sweet relief. They're found here as well. Our deepest needs and our greatest longings, all our convictions and feelings that sit beneath our mere words and sometimes even our actions. These are expressed in worship to God in the book of Psalms. And perhaps unlike any other book in Scripture, the book of Psalms gives us permission to speak freely and tell God everything. You will never surpass God's capacity for grace and true, real love. And you can never be too vulnerable for Him to handle. And you can always trust that whatever you tell Him will be taken to heart and most certainly cared for in His time and unique love and wisdom. That's what the book of Psalms tells us. That's why it's here. Because it describes us all so well and affords such sweet, deep, precious connection between us and the Father of our original birth. And this is the sweet, honest relationship that Jesus gave His life to reconcile. The book of Psalms is God's invitation and reassurance that you really can safely tell Him the way you feel. After all, that is the mark of the sweetest, deepest relationship you will ever have. God bless you guys.